next presentation, two great friends of ours and our organization from Boston area, ERIKA, FREY, and LASHA TSATAVA, two professional sommeliers and also educators in wine industry, will be presenting very interesting experience of their research and actually focus on internationalization of Georgian grape varietals based on experience in Finger Lake area in New York State. So two primary grape varietals from Georgian grape varietals that are present in the United States are Katsiteli and Saperavi, and LASHA and ERIKA will focus on these two varietals grown in Finger Lake area. Just for the sake of introduction, both of them were participants of our very first Ghvino forum in Washington, D.C. at the Center for Strategic International Studies. And since then, they are constant participants and dedicated supporters of this initiative. We consider them as a part of this team. So, ERIKA and LASHA, please, the floor is yours.
So here, and there should be an HDMI cable. Let's see. Looks like it. No, but we can still use it. Don't have to. Can you reach the tower? If you want to use that, okay. So up to you if you want to use it or not.
Yeah, you just click through here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is everyone ready? You ready? Okay. So welcome. This is very exciting for us, me and us together. My name is ERIKA FREY, and my wine education actually began in the Finger Lakes of New York. I went to Cornell University, and one of the rites of passage when you go to Cornell is that you take the Introduction to Wines course. And let's just say that was sort of the cutting that got planted in my life. And then it took a while to actually produce fruit. But several years later, after that experience, I am a wine educator and sommelier in the Boston area. And I'd like to introduce my partner here, LASHA TSATAVA, and he'll tell you a little bit about his origins.
Hello, my name is LASHA TSATAVA. I am originally from Georgia, but I've been living in the United States since '98. I have completed my WSET diploma, and I still yet haven't worked in a trade industry. This is purely passion driven. And I'm also one of the directors for a Boston Sommelier Society, French wine scholar and Italian wine maestro. And the reason why we're here today is that connection that ERIKA introduced me to the Finger Lakes region. And we have this very interesting story of connection with Katsiteli and Saperavi grapes that I personally come to love, and we hope that we share this story with you and bring you on this journey with us as well.
So let's talk about what we want to talk about and the messages that we want you to think about as we're going through the presentation today. We are going to first introduce you to the Finger Lakes region of New York. Most people don't even realize that New York is the third largest wine producing state in the United States by volume. And most people who have been to upstate New York probably don't realize that you could grow grapes very successfully there. We're going to also give you a little bit of an introduction to Katsiteli and Saperavi and sort of link their success to the Finger Lakes. And then we're going to profile 3 of the most important producers in the Finger Lakes of these grape varieties. And then talk a little bit about the present and the future of these varieties in the Finger Lakes. So Lasha is going to kick it off with an introduction to the Finger Lakes region.
Thank you. So Finger Lakes is an American viticultural area located in upstate New York in northeast US. And it's located south of Lake Ontario and to the east of Lake Erie. And the name Finger Lakes, basically the area encompasses 11 finger-like glacier lakes. And as you can see, lakes are oriented from north to south. And this glacier Finger Lakes originated around 2 million years ago. And they were carved out by successive waves of the glaciers. 2 of the most deep-watered lakes, Finger Lakes, and also amongst the deepest in US, are Seneca and Cayuga Lakes. Those are the middle 2 long lakes. And the main wine-growing region encompasses the 3 lakes in the middle, which is Keuka, Seneca, and Cayuga Lakes. To figure out where the location is precisely, let's talk about the latitude. So Finger Lakes are located and lie between 42nd and 43rd latitude. And these are the same range of latitude where Boston and Detroit are located. And also other famous wine-growing regions are Niagara Peninsula, California-Oregon border, Rioja in Spain, the Bandol in France, Tuscany in Italy, and Georgia is also on the same parallel. And other regions in Southern Hemisphere are Tasmania in Australia and Christchurch in New Zealand. When we talk about the lake influence and lake effect of Finger Lakes, we have to mention the Great Lakes of Lake Ontario to the north and Lake Erie to the west. These are the 2 lakes that create the warm currents in wintertime for Finger Lakes region and the cooler air currents in summertime. And this is especially important to the location of these vineyards. The vineyards, the northern Finger Lake vineyards, are closer to this warm currents in wintertime, as you can see on this image. And then obviously southern ones are a little further. And these Great Lakes, along with the Finger Lakes, moderate the continental, otherwise continental climate. And the 3 lakes, Keuka, Seneca, and Cayuga, ones that are in the middle, they moderate basically vineyard temperatures. And it's important to take into consideration the body of the water of these lakes, and as well as the depths of these lakes. And basically, the distance and the aspect of the vineyard is determined by the proximity to this one of the 3 lakes. And this is a NASA image of the winter 2013-2014, when all the lakes froze except the Seneca and Cayuga lakes.
Polar vortex year, or one of the polar vortex years.
And basically, just briefly to mention about the soils, that these glacier activities have created the complex soil patterns, and soils can range in Finger Lakes region from gravelly and low organic to loamy and fertile. And the diversity of the vineyards is consists to the soil composition and aspects towards the lake and proximity to these lakes. And to give you an idea about the size of the industry, we're talking about a little bit more than 130 wineries in Finger Lakes. More than 23% of plantings are vinifera, and the acreage is growing. In Finger Lakes, basically Riesling is a king. This is the most important grape variety. And also the focus is more on the aromatic whites. And from whites, we're talking about Riesling, Chardonnay, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Gruner Veltliner, Sauvignon Blanc, and additionally Cazzelli. And in the reds, we have Cabernet Franc, Lemberger, Pinot Noir, and also Cabernet Sauvignon and Saperavi. And I'm going to talk about both grape varieties before we talk about the producers. So Cazzelli is a primary grape variety, white grape variety of Georgia. It means red horn. Ka means horn, and red. Citelli means red. And it's one of the characteristics of Cazzelli grape variety because it ripens the stems more consistently than any other Georgian grape variety. That's the origins where the name comes from. It is adaptable to various vineyard sites, and it retains acidity really well during ripeness at different yields. And it's also very versatile and adaptable to different sites and climates. When we talk about Cazzelli or Saperavi, we have to talk about the cold resistance and one of the reasons why it's successful in Finger Lakes. This is one of the studies done in 30s during Soviet times. Soviets were very good at scientific experimentation, and basically this is a freezing temperatures and damage caused by freezing temperatures of these different grape varieties. And as you can see, Cazzelli is up there with the Riesling, even tiny better. And then it's followed by Saperavi and Pinot Noir. And there were a lot of studies done between 1931 and 38. This is one of the reasons why Cazzelli and Saperavi were chosen as one of the main grape varieties in ex-Soviet Union countries, and they were abundantly planted. And these studies have also shown that Cazzelli is very site sensitive and adapts to the different terroirs. However, during this adaptation, the fruit profile may vary based on these climatic conditions of different sites, but overall, the body alcohol and acid ratio is maintained. That's like a dream for any winemaker to work with the grape variety like that. And just to summarize, basically, Cazzelli retains high acidity during ripeness and at different yields. The total acidity is maintained throughout ripeness and almost never drops below 5, usually around 6 and 7. And it has a short fruit set, 2-3 days after flowering. And why it's important in Finger Lakes is that hedges the beds against freezing temperatures. Also, it's high yielding, 5 to 20 tons per hectare. Not that we recommend to go on the higher production levels of Cazzelli. That's what Soviets did, and we want to go after the quality. And one of the interesting characteristics that the berries of Cazzelli, 5 to 10%, are without pips. And in some vintages, more than 25% can be without pips. In terms of aromatics, generally, it's citrus and apple tones with the hints of white peach and or quince. And styles can range from dry to sweet, and also sparkling versions are produced. So the Cazzelli has a high tolerance to phylloxera, but it is susceptible to powdery mildew. And outside of Georgia, these are the different places it grows to throughout US, ex-Soviet Union countries, and even in China. I actually saw recently that Cazzelli produced in China, and according to John Robinson, it has an even different name, which goes by Bayou. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. So, about Saperavi, first of all, pronunciation. Saperavi, always in Georgian words, the syllable falls on the first half. And Saperavi means to color or to dye. And it's a Tenchuria grape variety. Tenchuria is a French word and means to dye or to stain. And it's a term describing the grapes whose flesh is pink or juice is pink or red. There are other Tenchuria grape varieties, most knowingly Alicante Bouchet and others. But this other widely known Tenchuria grape varieties are mostly either cross or a hybrid, when Saperavi is a Vitis vinifera, and also these other Tenchuria grape varieties have been developed in the last 200 years. We don't know the exact origins of Saperavi, but per academic Ivana Jalachishvili, who is a historian, linguist, and one of the founding fathers of Tbilisi State University, he states that the history of agriculture of Georgia past 13th century is basically unattainable. And, but he believes that Saperavi was originated in Shavshet Klarjeti, that's a southwest part of modern Georgia. And it went through Kartli and Ateni in the beginning of 18th century. And only at the end of 18th century, it made it to Kakheti, its current homeland. And even in terms of what tells us that this is an H-shaped grape variety is the morphology of this plant. It has a thick web-like covering on the underside of its leaves, and which, however, this is more typical of a Kolkheti region, ancient Kolkheti region in the west of Georgia, then Alazani Valley, and then its color, that it's so intense, so dark, and ability to produce the dark wines. Also, throughout the history, there are mentions of Xenophon, Herodotus, Strabo, the Greek historians have mentioned in their works that the viticulture on Georgia's modern day territory was widely spread. And we could assume that some of today's Georgia's grape varieties are either those ancient grape varieties or the closest relatives of them. And there are different variations and clones of Saperavi, and Saperavi is has the most number of variations than any other Georgian grape variety. And according to Lisa Granik, it at least 17 variations and clones of it. I did a little research, and this is basically listing some of the more common clones and variations of it. And what I would like to point out is on the bottom, Saperavi severni. This is a hybrid of Saperavi that happens to be available in more holding institutions than any other Saperavi clone that I have seen. And mostly it's throughout of Eastern Europe and also in University of Minnesota in US. And Saperavi has doesn't do well with phylloxera. I mean, now grape variety does well with phylloxera, but that can be combated with phylloxera resistant rootstock. And also in certain climatic conditions, it loses more than average flowering heads. And this may be combated by trimming the tips of some of these longer flowering heads before the stage begins. And Saperavi provides, it's a versatile grape variety. It's got color, it provides consistent acidity, tannins, it varies, it can be produced at a range of yields. It adapts to different soils and climatic conditions. To portray that, even in Kakheti, the most known PDOs, Hashmi, Sagarejo, and Mukuzani, this graph portrays a range of the terroir-specific versatility of Saperavi. The size of the stems, the ratio of skins, seeds, everything changes based on the terroir, and that's one of the adaptabilities of Saperavi. To summarize some of the strengths and versatility, it's basically producing the deep colored wines with ample acidity and tannins in various climates. It's both winter hardy and drought resistant variety. It's moderate to high yielding, 3-4 tons to 15 tons per hectare. It adapts to different soil types. And climatically, it's available from hot climates of Australia to cold climates. It survives from hot climates of Australia to cool climates of Finger Lakes. And with that, we will continue about the 3 main producers in Finger Lakes.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to what we've kind of fondly called the trinity of producers who have a very long history with growing Katsiteli and Saperavi in the Finger Lakes. So we're gonna start with Dr. Konstantin Frank Winery. I kind of like to refer to them as the origin story when it comes to these grape varieties. They were the first to really bring these varieties to the United States, and a lot of the vines were probably propagated from Dr. Konstantin Frank Winery. So who is Dr. Konstantin Frank? Well, he was born in the Ukraine in 1899, and he earned his PhD from the Odessa Agricultural College in the Ukraine in 1930. Worked with many different experiment stations, did a lot of, he managed a lot of vine growing and agricultural stations in the Ukraine. But he was from an ethnically German family. So after World War II, they were basically forced to flee from the Ukraine. They went to Germany, but didn't really feel welcomed in Germany either. So they eventually immigrated to the United States through Manhattan. And he spoke very little English. He spoke something like 7 to 9 other languages, but English was not his strong point. So it took him a while to learn English and then finally figure out where he needed to work. And some of his colleagues told him that there was an experimental agricultural station in Geneva, New York, which is one of the main cities in the Finger Lakes. And he made his way up there to find himself a job. And he was offered a job, but maybe not exactly what he wanted at the time, because his expertise was in Vitis vinifera, the species of grape that we find in Europe. However, when he got to the Finger Lakes, he realized that they weren't growing a lot of Vitis vinifera. They had somewhat given up on Vitis vinifera. It did not grow well in the cold climate. They were having problems with phylloxera. So what they mainly grew in the area at the time were French American hybrid grape varieties and also Native American grape varieties. But Dr. Frank was a strong believer that the quality of Vitis vinifera produced better quality wines. And with all of his experience from the Ukraine, planting these grape varieties in cold climates, he felt pretty confident that these grapes could grow in this sort of cool continental climate of upstate New York. It was a matter of getting the right rootstocks that could take the cold and were resistant to phylloxera, and also just, bringing up the vines appropriately. So he, after working and collaborating with some people in the Finger Lakes, he finally was able to plant his own vineyards. And this is on Keuka Lake, which is the lake that kind of looks like a Y shape on the western side. And that's when Vinifera Wine Cellars was established. Now, through the years, Dr. Frank brought dozens of different varieties of vinifera to the United States. Through different methods, some of this information is still a little bit anecdotal, coming from the family and from others who have worked with Dr. Frank, but maybe some through Maryland that came through Odessa. He also imported some vines through Quebec from Europe, but the point was to bring as many varieties as possible, test as many rootstocks, and figure out what varieties would work best in this area. So you can imagine the vineyards were packed with all of these different varieties, and two of the ones that did come were Rkatsiteli and Saperavi, because he had experience working with these varieties in the Ukraine. The winery also served as very much like a nursery, not just of vines. They were a vine nursery for much of the region for a while, but they also fledged a lot of winemakers and viticulturalists that spent time there, were inspired, sometimes even brought the grape material with them to other parts of the United States. So there are many winemakers throughout the states who have been influenced by Dr. Frank. Now the winery is run by the third and the fourth generation of the Frank family. So we see Fred Frank and Megan Frank, who are running the winery now. They did have to whittle down the dozens of grape varieties. So now they have about 17 different vinifera grape varieties that they work with, but still Rkatsiteli and Saperavi have made the cut. And part of that is because of their success and disease resistance and cold hardiness and ability to have a consistent crop in this particular climate. So they have about 10 acres of Rkatsiteli. They're a little bit more invested in Rkatsiteli as opposed to some other producers. They produce about 2,500 cases of it. 2 acres of Saperavi, mostly planted on Seneca Lake, which is actually a warmer climate than what they have in Keuka, and they produce about 250 cases. Their current products, they have Rkatsiteli made in stainless steel, and they have Rkatsiteli amber, not quite as amber as the Georgian ambers. It has about 2 weeks of skin contact during fermentation, and then it is actually taken off the skins and aged in amphora and neutral barrel. We're trying to get them to get a Qvevri, but we're still working on that. And they also produce Saperavi, which is matured in new and used French oak barrels. And they have a blend called Lena, which is a blend of usually the best barrels of red wine in the cellar, which often includes Saperavi as well. So next is McGregor, which doesn't sound very Georgian. It's actually a Scottish name, but they are probably the producers who have had the longest continuous experience with Rkatsiteli and Saperavi more in particular. That is their sort of bread and butter wine. So I title this Saperavi Built to Last. And you can see this is one of their original labels of Saperavi that was produced in 1985. So the vineyards were established by Bob McGregor in 1971. And he slowly built up his vineyards and then established the winery on the other side of Keuka Lake, on the eastern side of Keuka Lake in 1980. Bob was really in search of a red grape variety that could survive the winters and produce a good wine other than Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir seemed to be the only grape that really had much success, but you probably know that Pinot Noir in general is a light grape variety. And of course, in the Finger Lakes, it's even a lighter grape variety oftentimes. So in search of this, this magical red variety, he took a chance on some vine material that came from the USDA in Maryland. And this included Rkatsiteli, Saperavi, and then Syrexia Chorny and Syrexia Rose, which are actually, I believe they're actually Moldovan grape varieties. So the first vintages of Saperavi and Rkatsiteli were produced in 1985. However, Saperavi did not sell, probably because nobody knew what it was. The wine is also, as we heard, it's a very naturally high acidic wine. So they needed to do a little bit of tinkering in the cellar to get something that would actually be more palatable to their vineyard visitors. So they blended the Saperavi with the Syrexia Chorny and rebranded it as the Black Russian Red in 1991. Excuse me. And that's where they found success. Now, one of the things to note is that you could actually not legally put Saperavi on the label at this time. They had done it with their original vintage. However, they sell mostly from their winery. And I will explain that a little more when we get to our next producer. But the Black Russian actually developed a cult status in the Finger Lakes. People were seeking it out. The wine club members just bought it by the case. And one of the things that Bob McGregor and then later his son, John McGregor, found is that the aging potential for their Saperavi was incredible. They could age this wine for a decade or more, and it just seemed to improve and gain elegance as time went on. They chose to use American oak barrels. Saperavi does have very strong characteristics, so they felt the American oak barrels complemented the personality of Saperavi. And even though this was a blend, they found that Saperavi seemed to sort of take over in the wine. So really now, even though they have some more recent vintages of Black Russian Red, it is mostly Saperavi and very little Syrexia. So in 2017, they actually submitted their Black Russian Red to a competition in Georgia. It was a Ghvino News Saperavi World Prize, and their 2010 vintage at the time received the Grand Silver Award. Did you want to talk about the?
So just a fun fact that if the name Black Russian, if you ask any Georgian, top 3 names what not to call Saperavi, probably Black Russian would be one of them. And but that doesn't change the fact that it was successful, and we're grateful to this vineyard that they have actually come around, and Erika's going to talk about it in a moment, that they're relabeling and they're now varietally calling it Saperavi. But this story is a little bit ironic, but also successful.
Yes, so as Lasha mentioned, just recently, probably within the past couple of years, they have decided, much to the to the disappointment of some of their loyal fan club members, that they're going to rebrand the Black Russian red to Saperavi. And again, one of the reasons is now Saperavi can actually be put on the label. But talking to John McGregor, he said, it's just time. We had too many Georgians coming to visit us, and we're very disappointed by the name of the wine. But it's also in time for what we feel is really kind of going to be a surge in popularity for this grape variety in the Finger Lakes and beyond. So at the moment, they have 1.5 acres of Rkatsiteli planted, about 5 acres of Saperavi, and they are planting more Saperavi. Their current products include Rkatsiteli done in stainless steel. And if you haven't tried any Finger Lakes Rkatsiteli, it's very different from Georgian Rkatsiteli. The acid is incredible, and the aromatics are very, very different, I feel, but there are a couple of things that are a little bit similar. I think the weight and the body are also there. They also have Saperavi aged about 1 year in new and used American oak barrels, and then Saperavi Reserve aged 2 years in barrels, and their Saperavi Grand Reserve, which is aged for 3 years. So finally, we're going to talk about our third in the Trinity, Standing Stone Vineyards. And I have this picture here represents actually the transfer of ownership. There have been 2 owners of this winery, and both owners have had a significant impact on the Saperavi wine that's been produced there. So we have Fred and Oscar from Herman J. Wiemer on the left, who are the current owners, and then Tom and Marty Masinski, who are the original owners of Standing Stone. So this winery was established in 1991 by the Masinskis, and they are on Seneca Lake. So Seneca Lake, a little bit deeper, and especially the eastern shore, it gets the western sun, so the afternoon sun. So there's a term that they use, well, we probably use it in other places too, but there's a banana belt on the eastern shore of Seneca Lake, where these, especially the red grape varieties, tend to ripen better. They actually have Petit Verdot planted at Standing Stone, which I cannot believe, because that's one of the latest ripening varieties that we know of. So they planted 80 vines originally of Saperavi that they acquired from Dr. Constantine Frank Winery. Their intention was to blend it with Pinot Noir, to try to make the Pinot Noir a little darker, a little bit more textured, full-bodied, but that didn't work, because Saperavi, even in small quantities, is very distinctive. It shows up when it's blended with other wines. So with Pinot Noir, it was a no-go. So they decided to do it as a varietal, and they created their first Saperavi varietal wine in 2005. And it sold out very quickly. It was very popular. So they started planting more. And about every year, they planted another ½ acre of Saperavi taken from their original vines. When they, at the time they did their first Saperavi, they were really just selling from the winery. But when they thought about distributing it outside of the winery, they realized that you could not put Saperavi on the label. It was not a sanctioned grape variety. For some reason, it had gotten missed by the TTB. So you could not put Saperavi on the label. So they had to call it something else. And so this is one of the reasons. Again, we had the Black Russian from McGregor. Dr. Constantine Frank, actually, they bottled Saperavi blend under a name called Cuvée Rouge, because they could not put Saperavi on the label. So for Standing Stone, it was called the dark red. But Marty Masinski was formerly a lawyer, and she decided, I'm going to do something about this. So in 2013, she put together a petition, submitted it to the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau to request that Saperavi be allowed on the label. And she had help with evidence from Dr. Constantine Frank of how long the vines have been established, who's been growing it, such as McGregor, for many, many decades. So her petition was quickly approved. And 2012 was the first vintage that they bottled with the Saperavi varietal on it. So arguably the first legal Saperavi wine bottled in the United States. In 2017, they sold Standing Stone to Oscar Binke and Fred Mirwath of Herman J. Wiemer, who took the wine into a different direction. And just for fun, we requested the petition of Saperavi being put on the label, and we got a response from the TTB. So this is the original, or excerpts from the original petition that Marty Masinski submitted, and you can see her request to put Saperavi on the label. But interestingly enough, here's our trinity again. So we have Dr. Constantine Frank, McGregor, Standing Stone, all as sort of these long, with long histories of growing this grape variety. Also of note is the grafted grapevine nursery, which is now called Amberg Grapevines, which is a nursery that had long sold Saperavi plants. So under the new ownership, the versatility of Saperavi was really explored, and they experimented with a wide range of styles. They also branded their Saperavi wines with the word Teinturier to make reference to that rare pigmented flesh. And Standing Stone now has about 7 acres of Saperavi planted, and they also use that material for the Herman J. Wiemer vine nursery. So current products for Standing Stone are a Saperavi Rosé Sparkling, which is done in a traditional method, Saperavi Dry Rosé. They have Saperavi red wine, of course, that's aged in neutral Hungarian barrels and stainless steel. They have a Barrel Select that's aged longer in oak, a Saperavi Ruby fortified port-style wine, and they also have a Farm Red, which is a blend that is often based on Cabernet Sauvignon and Saperavi. So here, really, we see the range of Saperavi that can be produced in this region. And a final note just about the nurseries. We did talk to Herman J. Wiemer in terms of their vine nursery, and also to Erik Amberg of Amberg Grapevines, and asked them about what's the demand for Saperavi? And it's definitely been steady and growing. Rkatsiteli, unfortunately, not as much interest at the moment, but considering what Saperavi can do in the Finger Lakes, producing these deep red wines in a cool climate where usually this cannot happen consistently, this is significant. And Erik Amberg actually said to us, Cabernet Franc, I think that's a mistake in the Finger Lakes. Things like Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir, they're finicky, they're late, Cabernet Franc is a late ripening grape, and more often than not, you don't get the best quality. One of the messages we did hear from a lot of producers and from Erik Amberg that Saperavi produces a consistent crop throughout many different variations of vintages. So he really felt that Saperavi should be one of the top red grape varieties in the region, and we're going to see if that happens. We think there's definitely, again, a little cutting planted. We'll see if that grows into a vineyard. One of the interesting things, Herman J. Wiemer does source its Saperavi vine material from the Standing Stone vineyards, and sort of tracing the, who got which vines from where has been kind of an adventure. One of the things we did find out, though, from Erik Amberg was that he has started a certified vineyard, which he's going to be using for selling vine material. And he got his plant material from the Foundation Plant Services at UC Davis. So, there's a little bit of a idea, what is the Saperavi that is in the Finger Lakes? Is it Georgian Saperavi? Is it this Saperavi severni? Is it something else? But one thing we know for sure is that the new vines that Eric Amberg has planted are Georgian Saperavi. So that is vine material from Georgia. So let me go through my conclusions are backwards. Sorry about that. So a couple of conclusions to think about. From this presentation, we can see that Rkatsiteli and Saperavi have been growing in the Finger Lakes regions for about 50 years. So really, we can consider them almost traditional grape varieties of the region. They've had a long history in this region. Both of the grape varieties are very resilient and dependable, and that's one of the reasons why they work in this climate, where you have cold winters and a lot of vintage variation. The other thing that we heard from the winemakers is that these grape varieties, because there's nothing really to compare them to, there's not like Napa Valley Rkatsiteli or Bordeaux Saperavi yet. And that gives them a lot of freedom. They don't feel like they're being compared to anybody else or to any other wine style. So that gives them a lot of freedom to experiment and to really find the best expressions of these grape varieties in that region. And I'm going to hand it over to Lasha to talk about.
So to summarize also the strengths of Saperavi in Finger Lakes, it's basically Saperavi crafts a very distinctive red wine in terms of flavor, color, texture, acidity, age-worthiness. And it's a versatile grape variety, which is being explored by the winemakers in Finger Lakes. And it's becoming a signature grape variety of Finger Lakes. And the interest is spreading even through northeast of US. That's what Eric Amberg is sharing with us based on his data and orders of Saperavi and phone calls that he receives with the interest. And basically, the success of Saperavi domestically in US could be the recognition for Georgian Saperavi as well. And that's one of the things that excites us and keeps us going back to Finger Lakes and trying to, keep digging into this story and keep sharing it with everyone who wants to hear more about it pretty much. And we have managed to bring together these three producers that basically in a couple of weeks we have a event where this reach is expanded from initial point of starting with Dr. Frank and Megan Frank, who's a big supporter of this, two Standing Stone and McGregor wineries. Now, Chama Mama is coming into the place, and we have an event in a couple of weeks coming up where Chama Mama is gonna drive up from New York, cook on the open fire. We have two events for the consumers. And then on a Sunday and on a Monday, we have a trade event where these three main wineries are going to bring their own most important contacts, and they want to hear this story more and kind of figure out the plans for the future. And we do have also plans for the future beyond that event. We are forming a nonprofit organization, ERIKA, and to promote Saperavi and other Georgian grape varieties, Georgian food and culture in Finger Lakes and around US by organizing and facilitating educational seminars like this and hopefully exchange programs between the regions for wine and culinary industry professionals and enthusiasts. And there is a lot of people that we have to thank to contributing to this story. I won't go through the list of it, but it's like it's growing daily. And one of the things that we see is we are excited because of the feedback we're getting. Like every time we voice this story and like potential of Saperavi and Katsiteli in Finger Lakes, the response is very positive, tremendous, and it encourages us. And one of the reasons for today's presentation is to encourage you as well.
And certainly one of the things that we also find is that when we go into the Finger Lakes and we talk about Georgia and Georgian grape varieties, they also are learning from us. So they are learning about Georgia, the wines, the wine making. So the education is going both ways. So that's one of the sort of electric feelings about being in the region, is that we're learning about what they do, and we're also educating the producers of the Finger Lakes about Georgia and Georgian wines, and sort of the heritage that, you know, now they are able to embrace and maybe incorporate a little bit into how they make their wines or how they celebrate their wines. So that's an opportunity that we're also trying to give to them as well. Okay, so just thanks to some of the beautiful references that are out there, some of them dating back till 1960, I guess still very relevant, and something very recent from Lisa Granick as well, 2020. And we want to thank you to the Ghvino Forum and the National Wine Agency and America Georgia Business Council for inviting us to share this topic with you all. So if anyone has any questions, we're all ears. The price ranges, yeah.
Expensive. Katsiteli
stainless steel, that's more in the like 20-ish range, and but the Saperavis, those range quite a bit.
From probably 40s to like 80s a bottle, yeah.
On the shelf, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, or direct from the winery, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Why is it important to spend so much time on Saperavi? They don't taste like Georgian Saperavi. They don't look like Georgian Saperavi and Katsiteli. They don't taste like that. So why it is important for us to pay attention what's happening in Finger Lake area? You partly answered this question in your last comment, Erika, but so why we are spending time here today on that? So just very briefly, why this is important, and title of your presentation actually partly answers that probably.
So it's important because it increases the recognition of Saperavi as a grape variety, and it creates the discussion of why is it different or how is it different, and it engages more people to learn about Saperavi or compare it to Georgian counterpart, because there is really no we don't get enough Australian Saperavis in US, so all we have to compare is to American counterparts, and I think that helps the engaging conversations and learning more about it.
Yeah, thank you. Terrific presentation. It was really, really fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
So out of the Finger Lakes was an effort to promote Riesling, and they created the International Riesling Foundation. Are you all considering doing something along those lines? Because interestingly, it came out of the Finger Lakes, not Germany, but now the Germans have started to participate in the International Riesling Foundation efforts. Thank you.
Well, you the Riesling.
And the Riesling, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not about Riesling, but I mean, I think, I think one of the things that I found, especially about the Finger Lakes, is that, it's one of these communities where everyone has to help each other, and they're very good at collaborating, and certainly I can see why the International Riesling Foundation maybe started there, because they're the type of people that work together, and they're trying to promote, and they're trying to get the Finger Lakes on the map with international recognition. And I think that's starting to happen, especially in the Riesling category. I think what's important about Saperavi, especially, Rkatsiteli maybe will come along, but Saperavi in this region is going to be the darkest, boldest wine that they can consistently produce. And I think for them, it's going to be a very important grape variety, because people who come to visit and they're looking for a Cabernet Sauvignon, you're not going to get a Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon in this region, but you can get a full-bodied Saperavi. And I think this is a place where they can now embrace this grape variety, share the knowledge with each other of how this can benefit them. And I think the collaboration internationally is also very healthy with the Finger Lakes. They have Germans coming to now plant vineyards in the Finger Lakes. So what we're interested in is seeing, can we get some collaboration between Georgia and the Finger Lakes? What can these two areas learn from each other with these grape varieties? The other sort of point is that, Georgian wines, yes, they're very different. But one of the things that I think we're talking about today too is that, how does Georgia increase its presence throughout the world? And part of that is the exchange of knowledge and information. And I think this is an opportunity for Georgians to also come to the States. They see a grape, it's not their Saperavi, it doesn't taste like their Saperavi, but it is a wine that is increasingly getting popular in a United States area. And this is a market that Georgia wants to be in as well. So I think there's definitely opportunity for exchanging of ideas and knowledge. So a Saperavi Foundation might be something that comes out of this.
Mine is more of a comment. So in 2019, I actually brought 4 bottles of the Standing Stone Saperavi to a winery in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And the Georgians, it was really interesting to see the Georgians taste the Americans' Saperavi. And I would say that it really did affect how they viewed the Saperavi, and they created, actually from that tasting, they understood the American palate and what we liked. And they actually created their rosé Saperavi based on one of the Tinteriors, and a Saperavi mix based on the Farm Red. So it does happen. It's kind of on a micro scale, but I think it is important for the conversation to go back and forth to the countries.
And I also have one comment to add, that when it comes to Rkatsiteli and Saperavi, through the lens of Finger Lakes, Rkatsiteli has to go up against the counterparts from Finger Lakes, Riesling, Gruner Veltliner. That's a hard competition. Saperavi doesn't have that in Finger Lakes. That's why it has an opportunity to be the premier grape variety for Finger Lakes, because it offers all these advantages that were listed more consistently than any other grape variety, and especially the Cab Franc, which ripens, is a late ripener, so it's always a hard, it's difficult to ripen it consistently. Saperavi ripens more consistently than Cab Franc, and that would be one of the advantages, and we look forward to seeing what's going to happen.
Okay, go ahead.
ERIKA, LASHA, first of all, thank you so much for a wonderful storytelling. I really enjoyed it. And I want to wish you best of luck. I know you're on a wonderful path, so we'll support you in that path. I'll make a quick comment and then I'll ask you a question. I have a Katsiteli from Dr. Constantine in my wine flight, and it's a wonderful comparison for any customer, Georgian, not Georgian, just to understand the grape, wine, and how it reacts in any country. So it's a wonderful thing that we have something to compare, and it's a great thing, and we're looking forward to have, like, you know, Saperavi and Katsiteli also. My question is, you mentioned something about Ghvino, and of course, I don't ask you to tell me any secret information, but just so we kind of understand what is the future of Ghvino in United States and in Finger Lakes. Sure.
We have had conversations and it comes up, but so far it's a news that, and it's a trend that even Saperavi is picking up in Finger Lakes. So every time we bring up a Ghvino or Ghvino culture, it's a great conversation. However, the winemakers are scared in terms of, you know, hygiene and how to manage it. So we're only somewhere in the future talking about it, but we don't have anybody that is really interested to do it like in the nearest future. But of course, it always comes up. We have this topic as a something down the line.
Yeah, and it may be that the first Ghvino producer in the Finger Lakes maybe isn't making Katsiteli or Saperavi. They might be making something else in Ghvino.
ERIKA and LASHA, thank you very much for the story. It was very informative, and
Thank you.
good luck with your initiative in Finger Lakes. My question is, how do you think this collaboration would help sales of Georgian wines?
So as we mentioned before, if through more plantings of Saperavi, through more examples of Saperavi, more people gonna start seeking Saperavi in Finger Lakes, and it continues to become more popular, it will engage more conversation about it. That will turn into the more sales for Georgian wines. If Saperavi is a subject of conversation and people want to try it against Georgian counterparts, these are the people that you might not get in the store directly, and they come through learning about it through the region, through Finger Lakes. And that's how we see it helping down the road as well. And we mentioned it as a possibility because we do believe from what we've been observing and what feedback we get from the winemakers that it is, and nurseries, that nurseries are sold out on it, and there is more demand in the last 2-3 years than ever been about Saperavi. It's not at the level to affect you directly with the sales right now, but it's something we hope for down the road.
Well, yes,
Although I will add that we have done a couple of events where we were allowed to bring Georgian wines. And the question is, where can we get them? Not a lot of places in upstate New York that we know of. So if you know of places in upstate New York where they can get Georgian wines, tell us, because every time we go up there, you know, we get this question. There's not a lot in the area. You know, we've got Rochester, Syracuse, the Finger Lakes. So,
well, I didn't mean specifically that area. I thought of the United States. If that would help sales of Georgian wines in the United States. But the other thing is, do you think that it would be advantageous to create a distribution center of Georgian wines in the Finger Lakes area, or some vicinity?
Possibly, yes. It cannot hurt for sure. It should be decided in terms of how much would it cost to set something up and what is the demand. But we're working on a demand for it, and I think that would be also another great idea down the road. And obviously, next year, one of our events will be Saperavi Festival. So you're welcome to participate, and we can circle back to this conversation at the event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.